Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy.
Welcome to our Spring 2021 UCF Women's Soccer Preview Special. I'm Jeff Sharon along with Eric Lopez, and Eric, we're so used to doing this in the fall. Usually it's August, it's hot out, we're getting ready for, and women's soccer and men's soccer and volleyball signal to us like, hey, we're heading towards September, because usually they start in like mid-August, which is always so weird. But not this year. We're starting, thanks to COVID, we're starting in the spring, and it's weird, man. It's just so weird to be talking about soccer now. But I think it's also refreshing in a way, isn't it?
It's just weird. It's getting used to. It's confusing, and as we'll get into with Coach Sahaydak, just a chaotic offseason with so many moving parts, including roster moves, because again, you've talking about usually this time of year, players are, you have the NWSL draft, you got opportunities to play overseas. Mm-hmm. And as we'll get into with Coach Sahaydak, you had some of that as a result affecting this roster, especially on the back line, middle and the back line, as we'll talk about with her. Right.
So let's talk about UCF women's soccer. The last time we saw them out on the field was all the way back in 2019, Eric. Can you believe that? They finished 11-4-4 overall, 5-2-2 in the conference. Lost in the American Championship match again to USF, who's kind of become their bugaboo a little bit of late. Even though they beat them on Halloween night to end the regular season, USF got them back in Memphis at the Women's Soccer Championships. But this was a UCF team that, again, tough start to the slate, where they lost 1-0 to a very good Wisconsin team. They tied Ohio State, tied George Mason, beat Florida, beat Arizona State to start out, and like you saw them kind of catch their stride, where they won 8 of 9 at one point, before they kind of hit that little bit of a stumbling block. They had back-to-back scoreless ties against Temple and UConn, and then 1-0 win to East Carolina. It felt like the goal scoring kind of went away for a little bit, because over that stretch of the last 5 regular season games, they scored only 2 goals. And then, of course, they bust out for 5 against Houston in the women's soccer in the women's soccer tournament for the NCAA, but for the American. But they didn't get to the NCAAs, despite the fact that they had that 11-4-4 record. Their finishing RPI was 93. They were one of the better defensive teams in the country. 21st in team save percentage, 15th in goals against average. They average giving up only .551 GAA, which is really spectacular when you think about it. And they were in the top 50 in the country in corner kicks forced per game. So that tells you how aggressive they were. Although this is an interesting stat, Eric. They were actually one of the nation's leaders also in offsides calls, which you're near the top in corner kicks. You're tops in offside. That tells me that you're probably pretty youthful in your aggression. And that made sense, because in 2019, they were a pretty young team. They had lost Dina Orschmann and Stephanie Sanders, who both went on to play professionally in their native Germany. And so there were a lot of young players who got some run out there, but they were able to pull it together and put together a pretty nice run toward the end of the season. But now, a year and a half later, basically, what does this roster look like in terms of the talent that they're returning?
Well, it's still young, because, as we mentioned, some of the departures on the roster. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's defensively. Remember, Kanya Plummer, who was the American Conference, Defensive Player of the Year, is playing now in the NWSL. You have other players that went on to play professionally. Olivia Smith, for example, who was playing in defense, playing professionally overseas. So, there's some questions. And I think Coach Sahaydak even acknowledges that when you hear the interview. So, it's going to put pressure on Caroline Delisle, who had a tremendous freshman year as the goalkeeper, continuing this great tradition of great UCF goalkeepers at UCF. There'll be some pressure on her. And then offensively, as like you said, you got Kristen Scott back, but who are the other ones that could step up and be some offensive players? Is it somebody like Diana Martin, who had a big game in that Houston win that you mentioned, or is it a new face that we don't know about yet?
Yeah.
So those are some of the questions, but they got to get some answers quickly because they're starting in conference play. So it's going to be wild.
Well, we're going to get some answers from the head coach of the UCF Knights, former 99er from, she'll always be a 99er from the U.S. Women's National Team and head coach at UCF since 2013. Here's Tiffany Roberts Sahaydak with us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. And joining us now, one of our favorite interviews of all time. Usually when we talk to her, it's sweltering in the summer. We're getting ready for soccer, but here it is. It's freezing in Central Florida right now, and we're getting ready for a spring soccer season. And head coach for UCF women's soccer, Tiffany Roberts Sahaydak, is with us here on Black and Gold Banneret. What's up, Coach Tiff? How are you?
What is up, guys? I love being on here. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're really lucky to have you on. It's so weird. We were just talking before we came on about how bizarre everything has been for all you coaches. I mean, we don't envy what you guys have had to do. Just give it, if you can, before we start. It's been 16 or 14 months since you guys actually last played like a real game. You had some games in the spring. I think you had a scrimmage, like you said, against FSU, and you played a pro team from Finland too. But I mean, it's still different. So like, how have the last 14 months, like what have been the biggest challenges is just in terms of like the day to day, just under the pandemic that we've all been living under right now?
If I tell you all of them, it would just we would only talk about this on this podcast. So I'll give you a few. I think, if I had to sum it up, I think obviously like the protocols to even be able to continue to train. So when it first hit, obviously we all left for spring break and then we didn't come back, but then just getting everyone back in the summer and being able to train, all the protocols that we've been adhering to this past summer and fall, it really doesn't allow a lot of social time, camaraderie, just that connection that I feel is so important. I mean, I feel like I talk about that all the time in the culture and how much that affects our success on the field. And that's just been one of the biggest challenges is that, we literally are living out of our cars, our boots and jackets are in our cars. We roll up to the training field, get out, train, get back in our cars and leave. And so there's just not that extra added piece of having team meals together and the girls just getting together, outside of the training field. So that, puts a damper on things. It's just not as fun. I'm going to be honest. I love soccer and we love to train, but at the end of the day, you still need that human connection. And we were really lacking that, over the fall due to all the protocols, but at least, we were able to train. So we tried to stay positive, not COVID positive. Let's be clear. Tried to, put a good spin on everything and be appreciative for everything that we did have. But at the end, it was hard. So the protocols, just COVID, the camaraderie, the human connection, not only a pandemic did we go through, but the social injustices that, came into light and people were having more clear understanding of, the racial and the inequalities that we were, dealing with. That was very emotional for our team. And, so not only were we going through a pandemic, we were going through all these social injustices, or not for the first time, obviously, but coming to light for a lot of people. So, I still see that as a positive too, just because it was needed to have those, conversations. So I will say that although it has been so challenging, we've all come out better for that. And I've always felt that, all these challenges, there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel. It just probably lasted a little longer than we wanted to. I would say the last big challenge, to sum it up, would just be like roster, because we had seniors, a few seniors that were slated to graduate in December. And once we found out in September that our season was going to be canceled or postponed, those particular seniors decided to, have new goals. So playing pro, so we lost some senior veterans. So we lost some depth in certain positions. And then I would say also we didn't get some certain players to even come in because of the pandemic. So, embassies were closed down. So the roster challenges, that was very stressful too. But, at the end of the day, we managed and we sorted out. And, we lost a few players opting out just because of the conditions or, being international, not wanting to come to the U.S. So just the roster, to sum it up, I would say that would be the other challenge that we faced.
It's got to be remarkable with you and Scott. I mean, with the sport as a whole, you mentioned going from fall to spring. I don't know if casual fans understand what a huge difference that is. And you mentioned it affects your roster. Usually this time of year, you're losing players to play either in the NWSL, which the draft just happened. The draft just happened. And players are getting ready to start overseas and play international. And here you are trying to deal with all that right before the season starts. It's how do you feel as a sport has this gone through? Because I know you're not the only one. This is the entire sport's going through this. But how has this been handled, I think you feel, by the sport overall? I mean, it's got to be one of the wackiest things ever.
It really, wacky is a really good word for it. And I will say that we are in a situation where we didn't have like 9 seniors. We only had a handful, even though, we've had they were impactful players for us. But I'm glad that we're in a situation where it wasn't our entire team that we were losing. So we are considerably young. And so it didn't impact us as much as I've seen some other teams, even in our conference, because obviously we're close and our head coaches talk within conference, and you can see how it's really impacted some other programs. And so thankfully it didn't impact us the same way maybe as some other programs, since we weren't senior heavy this past year. But it still affects your roster and your roster size and your depth in certain positions.
So we wanted to touch upon that too, because it's, we thought in 2019 coming in after you lost Steph Sanders and Dina Orshman, we were like, oh man, there's going to be a lot of young players getting some PT. They're going to have to step up. And lo and behold, they did. Kristen Scott is back from what I understand. Ellie Moreno, they're both first team all AAC. You lost Zandy and Kanya, from 2019 who've moved on, but you still have that good young core coming back. And, like you said, so who are you looking at to really make a leap this year in this, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, in this really abbreviated season that you have in the spring?
Yeah, for sure. Abbreviated. But again, thankful that there's something to play for. Kristen is a veteran. She's really been stepping up, and she's on another level right now, just I think with the experience and now feeling that she's in a role where, the young players are looking up to her. So that I think that gives her a boost in confidence, and it's showing out on the field and training. So, Kristen definitely, I want to bring up Madison Mernon. I know she's been this quiet player that, she doesn't get recognized a lot, but in a way that's how Bridget Callahan was. Bridget, she didn't win any awards in the American. She wasn't throwing up all these stats, and Madison Mernon is the same way. You kind of have these unsung heroes on your team where they might not be heavy in stats, but they're your heart and soul. And I would like to say Madison Mernon is our lone senior, and she is a veteran, and she plays in the midfield. Well, she actually had to play in the back for us in 2019, but due to the exodus that we had with players leaving to be pros, we had to put her back into the midfield, which was her original position. And she's a heart and soul. You'll see her running around like crazy, and but she's an inspiring player. So I know, she might not get a lot of accolades, but she's a big time player for us and super consistent. You can rely on her. So like to give her a shout out. And then, Caroline Delau, our goalkeeper, she was only a freshman last year, and she did not win, the goalkeeper, of our conference. But she could have. I mean, her stats were unbelievable for not having a lot of experience. She looked like a veteran. She's doing great right now. So we're really going to have to ask a lot of her because we have a brand new back line. Again, I feel like this happens a lot, but with Kanya leaving and we don't have Olivia Smith left to play professionally. And then Madison, we had to move to the midfield. So we literally have a brand new back line. So thankfully we have Carol as well. So if we have some challenges, with experience, we have Carol there. And then you mentioned Ellie already. We'll see how other players step up.
You mentioned Caroline. I mean, the goalkeeping tradition at UCF is so rich. I did a summer series of all greatest athletes, female athletes, and the goalkeeping at UCF even blew me away kind of doing the research. So it's probably one of the more pressure cooking positions in UCF athletics. And she handled it incredibly. Did not know she would have been a freshman if you would have not told me she was a freshman. Could have won goalkeeper of the year. Certainly she's going to be in the mix this year. Does she have to be more of the vocal leader because you're young in the back line, that she has to be more of the vocal leader? Is that something that's the next step for her?
Definitely for this year. Last year being a freshman, Kanya was a veteran. And so, Kanya spoke up and led a lot vocally. But this year we told her, that is the area where you need to step up. And, she has so much respect from everybody around her. She's a captain, actually. She's been named as a captain for starting this fall already. She's proved that because she is the most selfless player and teammate, and then she works her butt off. She's like the perfect player as for a coach, she just checks all the boxes. And she'll have to step up to that role, and she's working on it, and I think she'll do a great job.
So one of the things that I looked up when going through the numbers from 2019, I keep on saying almost last year, but it's not last year. It's like it's a year and a half ago. But
right.
You guys were first in the American in fewest goals allowed with 11, which is an amazing statistic when you think about it. And obviously Kanya had a lot to do with it, and Caroline, of course. But you mentioned that the big changes that you have in the back line. So are you expecting the back line to still kind of be the center of gravity this year? Or are you looking to maybe see if we can score some more goals this year if the back line is not quite where it needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I'd still like the back line to be the center of gravity and holding us down and having similar stats. That would be ideal. But it's hard to say because we haven't played anybody yet. So I'm not sure where we're really at as a back four. I think, we're going to make some mistakes, and I think that is okay. That's going to be part of our growth. And, but we are, we've been training like crazy, that back four. So hopefully I do think that they're going to have confidence going forward. And, like I said, with Carol, and now you have Madison Mernon playing in the midfield. So you have her in front of them and some, veteran mentality in front. So I think they're going to be great. I have a lot of confidence in them, but, time will tell, and we'll see where our holes are. But I will say that I'm expecting, more goals from us. I think we have a lot of depth. I think we have, so if you think about, if you have 3 front runners and an attacking mid, or even 2 attacking mids, so there's 5 players right there. I think 5 players can be interchangeable. We have more than 5 starting players for those 5 positions. And I think that is going to help because we're going to have that depth. Although the depth isn't as important this year with only one game a week. But I love the fact that there's some competition up there and we're performing well up top. And I think, my expectation is that we'll be scoring more goals.
Go ahead, Eric.
Do you feel it's going to be a balanced scoring? Because Kristen's going to get a lot of attention, and in the past, that's nothing new with this program. Other players tend to step up. I remember towards the end of 2019. See, now Jeff's got me thinking about last year, 2019 as well. It's really weird. But I remember Diana Martin kind of stepped up towards the end and really grew. What is that something? Do you see more balanced scoring? Just talk about some of the scoring options you're going to have. You mentioned you've got some good competition going, but I feel like some girls grew up that season that will benefit this year.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Diana, you mentioned Diana, and she's kind of a quiet, we don't talk about her that much. And the conference, they don't recognize her for the preseason, but like you said, you're spot on about how she stepped up towards the end, and she's a force. She is a force. We have her going up against our back line, and her athleticism, her speed, her ability to finish when she gets into those, those spots on the field. She's been scoring goals at practice. So she's, right in the mix. And we have a couple freshmen that are doing really well right now from different parts of the world. We have the Maggie from New Zealand, and we have Katie Bradley from England. And Mallory Olson has been pretty quiet. She's a transfer from Miami. She hasn't made a huge impact for us yet, but you can just tell she has so much fire, so I trust that. She just scored a great goal in the inner squad. We ended up being offside by like a foot, but it was a great goal. So we have options, and I think, we'll see. I don't even know who I want to have starting yet. And I think it will be a combination, like depending on who's on the field, you'll have different strengths, right? So depending on which players you have on it's not going to be the same look depending on who's on the field. Because one attacking player plays one attacking midfielder plays totally different from another attacking midfielder. So it's just finding that combination.
That we joke with you every year when we talk with you about the Murderer's Row schedule that you like to put together. And this year you had no control over it, and they still gave you a Murderer's Row because we're only playing in conference, right? 8 conference games, but you were picked to finish second in the conference preseason. Memphis was picked to finish first. You're playing at their place. USF was picked to finish third. You're playing at their place. So they still get you with the schedule, isn't it? I mean, what can you possibly do to catch a break with this?
I always put a positive spin on things. It's just going to make us better. So our goal is to get in the NCAA tournament, and, you got to get through. It's just like, I think about World Cup, you have that death,
group of death,
right? And I mean, you got to get through these teams in order to be at the top at the end. So that's how I look at it. And I'm not worried about the weather. Okay, guys, I'm being away is fine, but being away in February at Temple, I hope my players aren't listening to this right now, because I'm a baby when it comes to cold. So I hope my players are a little tougher mentally than I am when it comes to cold weather.
Man, yeah, that's right. That's one of the differences in spring than the fall. But you mentioned you used to, that non-conference was something that you could build on and learn about your team. You don't have that ability. This is like, we've joked about how in past years, hey, the soccer season is kind of like a sprint. This is like a 150-meter run here. I mean, how do you approach this? It's almost like every game. I mean, it is a must win basically right from the get-go, which is tough because you're still trying to learn your team, but yet you got to put results in.
Yeah, there's no time. I mean, you have one game. Thankfully, we have one exhibition, against Miami, and that's always a good game, being 2 Florida schools, and then it's right into it. You don't have time to make a mistake. That's what's hard. You can't give away one game. And playing this time of year, like I said, the challenge is, going to Temple and snowing today there. And you just you have no time. But everyone's in the same boat. So it's not just us. And we got to deal with it better than anybody else.
I wonder, with being in the spring, has that helped the newcomers because they've been around? Has that made, whereas opposed to being in the fall, big difference, no difference from the newcomer standpoint as far as how they've blended in and can contribute?
That is a good, call on that, because it is positive for the newcomers. They've had a whole semester, even though that semester was weird. We still trained, and they've had a semester, under their belt. It's almost like when we have freshmen come in January, right? Mid-year, just having that extra semester of not a lot of pressure of, playing time or having to perform or making a travel squad. You rip all of those pressures away, and then they could just develop. And so our new players, we've had time as a staff to help those players develop, help those players get comfortable, help those players understand, our system and our expectations. So I do think that is actually something to really lean on, because we normally don't have that, right? If those freshmen don't come in January, it's like they come in August, it's like, boom, the season hits them in the face in 10 days. So I do think that we are better off with the young players having that time to work together.
I wanted to ask you a question about the sport in general. We've talked with your compatriot on the men's side, Scott Calabrese, about this, but I don't think I've actually had the chance to ask you about this. Prior to COVID-19, there was a move was gaining momentum to make college soccer a year-round sport, fall and spring. You're playing in the spring this time around, 1 game a week, conference only, which if that goes through, it would be kind of similar to how you would play if soccer were a year-round sport. So is this kind of a dry run for that? And I mean, what are your thoughts on that idea of, instead of playing 2 games a week in that fall sprint, now you're playing 1 game a week and you're spreading the season out over the fall and spring? What do you think about all that?
Well, there's no doubt, physically it's a better situation to keep our players healthy, right? I mean, 2 games in 1 week in the sport of soccer is very demanding, and it's very intensive. So to squish, 20 some games in, a few months, that's hard for anybody. So to be able to spread it out, I think physically you would see less torn ACLs and injuries. Obviously for a staff, it's, I love it because I was thinking, whoa, we're going to have a whole week to do a scout on another team, not just 1 day in between. If you play Thursday, Sunday, it's like we're turning around and trying to put together a scouting report for our next opponent, where we'll have some time and have time to train. When we play Thursday and Sunday, normally you don't really have a lot of training days. It's really about recovery. So there's not a lot of development really that goes on in the fall in normal times. So there are so many aspects about having that split season or, full year, a school year, having the season throughout the whole school year. There's so many great things about it. The one negative that I'm seeing right now is the weather. I think it's, for Floridians, I mean, if we're only playing Miami the whole time or South Florida, UF, that's one thing, but having to go to Temple in February is not going to be fun. And there are going to be so many teams up north that I don't know how they would deal with the weather challenges. So that would be a big question for me.
Could be an advantage though, because once in the second half of the season, you have 3 of your last 4 at home, and the only one that's not is in Tampa. So the weather will be nicer, I think, later in the season. That could work out in your favor though, no?
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
There you go. She's hoping you're right there, Jeffrey. I'm curious. I mean, I'm so fascinated by what everything's gone on in soccer. We talked about obviously the flip of the schedule as far as going from fall to spring and how that's affected the rosters. The tournament's going to be 48 teams this year from 64. You had conferences that played in the fall, and then obviously leagues like ours that is playing this spring. I'm just curious, as someone who has grown up in the game, your thoughts on all this. How does that 48 teams spring? Has this been handled greatly? Did you wish there were some things that could have been done differently? I mean, or is that just you can't even worry about that, right? You just go with the flow, right?
Honestly, if I did focus on that, it'd just be so distracting. So I really have not put a lot of time in it because I am, I teach my players, we got to control what we can control, right? So I can't be doing opposite of what I'm trying to teach my players. So that is out of our hand. Yeah, I would have loved for everyone to be in the same boat. And, we had so much, each conference had a lot of flexibility, not a lot of mandates from the NCAA. And, and I don't know what the right answer is. We've never been through this. So I'd hate to say, NCAA did a poor job because, now the ACC played and we didn't, and there's advantages and disadvantages to that. So we can talk about that forever. But at the end of the day, I don't want to be distracted. And I've really just controlled, okay, tell me what I'm allowed to do and I'll do my best with that situation. And that's how I've been managing that. And, where we were allowed one exhibition match, that's it. Okay, that's great. Like, what are we going to do with that? And, we realize it's going to be very competitive and very difficult in our conference. I feel strongly that we have to win our conference to get into the tournament. If we go undefeated and lose in the final, I think there's a chance to get in at large. Other than that, I think it's going to be really hard because we can't look at RPI, right?
Right.
So I think that committee is going to have a hard time, trying to figure it out.
It's going to be fascinating. Although, Michelle Akers, we had on in the summer, and she talked about back then, they had no criteria. There was 12 to 16 teams that made it. There was one of her teams that didn't make the tournament because of tiebreakers of goal scoring, which is kind of crazy when we think about that back. So the sport, at least you have, you can control your own fate, right? That's, I'm assuming the message to your team is if you control your destiny, you control, if you take care of business, win your league, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
Right. And that's exactly what the focus is. One game at a time, take care of each game. Now, something that we haven't even talked about, brought up, is there is in the back of my mind that, we get tested twice a week, and I'm hoping that we don't have any disruptions.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we get all the games that are on our schedule. But as you can see, what's happening to sports, all around the country during COVID, there's been disruptions, So if we get through, honestly, for our expectations for the spring, if we get to play every game that's on our schedule, that's listed on our schedule, that is a win within itself. Whether win or loss for the spring, if we stay healthy and get to even play every game, that is going to be just success right there.
Yeah, we're with you on that because it's been wild following basketball. Football got through it pretty doggone well this year. They deserve a lot of credit. I've been blown away. We both have been blown away by how, committed, the athletes have been. They've been great at just adapting to these unbelievable circumstances, and you guys too, the coaching staff. And it's a credit to all of you guys for, your communication and, with them and making the best of a weird situation. So, our props to you guys, and we know that the season's going to turn out to be, we hope that the season's going to turn out to be a really successful one. There's one sort of little bit of leeway in the schedule after, or in between the last two matches of the year. You have kind of that week off. So here's hoping that you don't have to use that week off, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, Tiffany Roberts Sahaydak, UCF Women's Soccer. The season starts with an exhibition Sunday, February 7th against the Miami Hurricanes. Time for that match is at 1 p.m. So it's definitely worth checking out if you can get down there. Season starts at Temple, 12:30 p.m. on Valentine's Day, Sunday, February 14th in Philadelphia. And then the home opener is against Cincinnati, February 21st at 1 p.m. Knights have ECU, SMU, Houston, and Cincy at home. It's going to be a wild ride, Tiff, but we're going to be right along with you the whole way.
You guys are awesome. I always love coming on here and talking shop with you guys. It's so fun. You can just see from my smile. And I love talking about all this. It gets me excited. So thank you for supporting us always.
Well, thank you for your time. And we look forward to seeing more soccer this year. And best of luck. We'll catch you during the year. All right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks to Tiffany Roberts Sahaydak. She's always so much fun to talk to. We love talking with her. We love talking with Scott Calabrese and the men's team. They're so accessible and so insightful too. And we appreciate them tremendously. And thanks to Colin Yeager for pulling everything together and setting everything up for us. We're huge fans of Colin, so we want to thank him for his help on this. Stick around. We'll be right back. We'll kind of debrief off the women's soccer team, look ahead to their schedule and what our expectations are for them in just a moment here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Don't go away.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you, talking about the UCF women's soccer team for the spring of 2021. We just got done talking to Tiffany Roberts Sahaydak, their head. Two preseason all-conference selections for UCF this year, Eric, and it was Ellie Marino and Kristen Scott. Interestingly enough, Caroline Delisle was not selected, which I thought was a little bit of a surprise for the preseason all-conference team. UCF was picked to finish second by the league's coaches behind Memphis. And boy, have UCF and Memphis gone at it quite a bit over the last several years. So it's UCF, Memphis, and USF every year. I feel like this team is kind of a sleeper pick in the American, Eric, don't you?
If they get the scoring and that youth in the back line kind of grows up quickly, then yes. But that's, again, when you don't have the non-conference schedule, you have just an exhibition to get ready before conference, that's a little nerve-wracking. So how will the youngsters respond? And Delisle being the vocal leader, but they got to get some more scoring, and I think that's the key. I think Moreno's a good name to keep in mind. She was a youngster, scored a big goal in the win against South Florida. Mm-hmm. So I do like her, and I think the potential. But the thing is, this is a sprint. There's no time to develop here. You got to go. You got to get ready right from the get-go. And that's kind of why it's going to make this so wild. Sprint. Memphis has been very good. I certainly understand why they're the favorites. USF lost Evelyn Vians. She is now playing in the NWSL with the Sky.
And we're really happy that she's gone to the NWSL because she was she was a great player. Just an amazing
they've ever had.
Yeah, maybe one of the greatest players in the history of all the schools here in the American. Just a spectacular player, and we are not sad to see her move on to the NWSL, believe me.
No, I'm not. The rest of the league isn't either. So that hurts them a little bit. And so she scored 73 goals. So I think it's wide open, though. I'd say those three are the teams to give the benefit of the doubt. I think the champion comes from those three. And the thing is, with, again, the field going down from 64 to 48, you can't assume anything on a selection show. So by the selection committee. So your best bet is win the conference and not worry about it. Otherwise, you're going to be sweating it, especially in a year where you're going to have a committee judging teams based on conference games only. So it's very bizarre, and it's going to be wild. It's just, how does this group, especially in the back line, grow? How quickly can they grow will determine if this team can win the league or not.
Well, they're going to have to figure it out real quick because 3 of their first 4 regular season matches are on the road. Their only home game is against Cincinnati on February 21st. Of course, they have that exhibition against the Miami Hurricanes this coming Sunday, February 7th at 1 p.m., but it is an exhibition. But, like we talked about with Tiffany, the good thing is, when 3 of your first 4 are on the road, 3 of your last 4 are at home. And actually, in the back half of the season, they don't even have to leave the I-4 corridor because their only road game is at South Florida. But it's kind of a tough break to get them, them being the Bulls, on the road this year, along with Memphis, who is picked to finish first in the league. In the middle of the schedule, that's 2 tough road games, sandwiching a home game against East Carolina there in the middle of March, no?
Yeah, I mean, that's the tough draw as you go on the road in certain years, and usually it's an even year, but of course we're in an odd spring year, but what else is odd? Everything's odd. So, I mean, that's the tough draw is you got to go on the road probably against those top 2 contenders and get some results and then take care of everybody else at home. But again, the good news is you kind of get them a little bit later, especially South Florida, so you got time to grow. But, yeah, I mean, defensively, backline's got to be strong. Offensively, who are the goal scorers? And, Caroline Delisle, can she take another, she was tremendous, got to be the leader. Can she put herself in that start conversation? This is a program that has tremendous tradition, as I mentioned, in goalkeeping. You think of Alina Reyes, who's in the Hall of Fame playing for the national team in Brazil. You think of players like Jennifer Manis, Alyssa O'Brien, Vera Veras, for example, very recently under Coach Sahaydak,
Kim Wyatt.
Oregon. Yep. Kim Wyatt, who's played on a national team as well. So, I mean, the list goes on and on. Karen Richter. I mean, it's the goalkeeping in UCF women's soccer is probably the most pressure-cooking position among the top three positions in all of UCF athletics, if you're really being honest about it. Amy Griffin, for example, another great goalkeeper who played with Michelle Akers, we talked about when we had Michelle Akers on. So Delisle is the next one. And fairly or not, goalkeepers at UCF get judged very highly, just like pitchers in softball, UCF softball does. And you could say maybe even like defensive backs, even at UCF in football and things like that. So, but Delisle's talented, just a sophomore, could have won goalkeeper of the year last year, certainly a contender this year. That's, if she could certainly make some things easy for that young back line and be that vocal leader that Coach Sahaydak hopes for.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a really good year from her because it seems like, how about if you're a sophomore, right? I mean, she was a freshman from before. She heads into her sophomore year, and your sophomore year is actually, granted it's unusual because of COVID in terms of the academics that you have to do and staying home and all that, but that extra half a year, I think, makes such a tremendous difference. And I think the other thing that's going to make a good difference for this team is they're playing one game a week. And, usually when it's like that, usually they would do like Friday night, Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, or Thursday and Sunday.
Or Thursday and Sundays.
Sundays, Friday. Yep.
And that is so hard. I mean, that is, it's brutal. It is absolutely brutal. Like Tiffany was talking about, now you can you have some time to recover. I really do think that some good things are going to come about, are going to come about from this experiment, if you will, from both men's and women's soccer playing in the spring. And, for the sake of the safety and the health of the players, I hope they do make this a regular occurrence where we have, half a season of non-conference in the fall and half a season of conference play in the spring. I think that would be better for overall. Plus, it's more soccer for us to watch, right?
Well, let's just worry about getting through this spring first, then. We'll worry about that down the road.
All right. Fine, you party pooper. All right. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on UCF women's and men's soccer all throughout the year. Again, the women's team opened their season. They hit the pitch for the first time on February 7th. That's this coming Sunday at 1 p.m. playing Miami in an exhibition. And then it counts for the first time on Valentine's Day. That's a Sunday, but they're in Philadelphia to play Temple. Their first home game is Sunday, February 21st against Cincinnati. There'll be plenty of coverage on ESPN Plus, where you can watch the nights live. And, of course, you can follow us here at Black and Gold Banneret for all the latest on UCF soccer as they look to get back to the NCAA tournament once again under Tiffany Roberts Sahaydak. And who knows, maybe in this abbreviated season, come through with an American championship. The American Soccer Championship takes place April 15th and 17th at a site to be determined. And that's still at the home of the number one seed, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Eric?
As far as we know, that is correct.
Right. So it's not like it is in volleyball where it's the previous year's number one seed. It's the home of the one seed that they get to host this shortened tournament. Usually it was 3 rounds, top 2 teams get a bye. Now it's just semifinals and finals. 4 teams, 3 days, and then we get out of there. So it's going to be a Naruto run to the finish for soccer, in particular UCF women's soccer, as they play every opponent that they have in the schedule in the American just once. So again, just like the men, it'll be a wild ride going forth. All right, make sure you follow us here at blackandgoldbanneret.com. You can follow us for all the latest UCF sports news, part of SB Nation, of course. You can also follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret and Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. Follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon and Eric Lopez Elo. And please, if you don't already, subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform, be it Android or iPhone that you may wish, wherever you download your podcast. If you do already subscribe to us, awesome. We thank you so much. Please leave us a comment and a rating so that more UCF fans can get more of our content that you enjoy so much. And we appreciate your spending time with us and listening to these podcasts so that you can get the full rundown of every UCF sport that we have to cover for you. So for Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you so much for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast Spring 2021 UCF Women's Soccer Preview Show. Best of luck to the ladies, and we will see you next week.